Good afternoon and welcome to my office. Today's topic is Keepers of the Faith. In the book of Revelation, the Apostle John wrote of the faithful courage of the saints who are enduring the intense persecution of the last days. He writes, "Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus." In one of his latter books entitled How Should We Then Live?, Francis Schaeffer sums up the true believer's challenge as the Western world continued its dismantling of everything Christian. He addressed the need to live the Christian ethic, accept the totality of God's revelation, and to affirm the Bible's morals, values, and meaning. The work was published in 1976 and stands as testimony, along with others, as to the acuity of their analysis toward the downward trajectory of today's culture. That being said, where does this leave the church today? And what does that mean to a church that faces a darkening world? What I would propose is nothing original, but to suggest that cultural decline, understood accurately, actually prepares and opens the door for genuine spiritual vitality expressed by those who will keep the faith. This then is a call towards steadfast obedience while living in the twilight of a world hopelessly lost without any possibility of redemption outside of God's judgment on sin. Biblical history records sweeping judgments of God when humanity had become hopelessly depraved and unredeemable. He destroyed the world with a flood, and then later he executed judgment again by scattering its people, by confusing their language. After the patriarchs, we had the introduction of law, which intensified man's conscious awareness of God's presence and expectations, culminating with the coming of Jesus Christ, who then established the church. As the church had provided an even greater restraining influence, we see again a plunge into lawless depravity, which calls for God's massive judgments, preparing for the coming of the Prince of Peace, as revealed in the books of Daniel and Revelation. In addition to standing fast in a depraved world, the epistles of the New Testament direct us to another front by which the church must become vigilant keepers of the faith, being aware of those who are departing from the historic faith within it. Both apostles Paul and Peter wrote concerning this apostasy, and it was Jesus himself who had concluded that many will depart from the faith. This departure is identified by none other than those who reject God's word and misrepresent his sovereign nature. This, I believe, is where God's judgment of the church is actually twofold, leading to renewed vitality. The widening apostasy that is now occurring cannot inspire nor empower its adherents to offer up their lives, nor suffer for the sake of the message of the cross. Rather, as their profession proves to be without substance, God will reveal and revitalize his true representatives through their courage and love. For this reason, Jesus reassures the church of this fact, "And I tell you, are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Furthermore, the Apostle Peter stated, "For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God, and if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God?" God calls the church to be keepers of the faith, a noble calling that only those of true faith can surmount its stiff challenges. More than ever before, it must take its responsibility to respond to God's discipline and determined by God's provision of grace to hold to the historic faith in true obedience. It must shake off the delusion of the past years of living within Christendom, which had in past times obscured the challenges of genuine faith toward what was in reality a lost and rebellious world. Today, one can clearly see the ravages of godless chaos, an immorality that now identifies a world that, regardless of the many religious professions and expressions, they hate the God of the Bible. If today you are a keeper of the faith, then you are a light that shines all the more in this world's present darkness. The challenge for you is to determine by God's grace to stand fast in that faith. By acting out the realities of God's instruction, you make certain and affirm your calling as keepers of the faith. In this we meet God's grace at the critical point of facing the very challenges that challenged that first church of Antioch. If you do so, you will discover with increasing delight the true joy and vitality of standing fast while armed with the gospel of grace. And as with David, you might face the giant, but always remember that it is God who writes the end of the story. And thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.